Thank you very much for those of you who came back, who survived so far. This is the last panel, the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm not talking about going home. I'm talking about the next hour or so of the final panel. We spoke with the regulators, we spoke with the vendors and solution providers. And now it's time to speak with actually those who need to make those decisions, the bankers themselves. הולכים לבנקאים in Hebrew. So without further ado, I'd like to ask our panel members to the stage. So give it to William Varma, Head of Cybersecurity Strategy, Labs and Solutions at Bank of Montreal. William. David Benattar, cyber architect at Bank Hapoalim. Jim De Haas, cloud security wizard at ABA and AMRO. He's actually the only one who is really cloud ready, as I say in his surname. And here you go. Take your seats. And Shuky, Peleg, Head of Cyber Defense and Information Security at First International Bank of Israel. And Yoav Sudman, System Information Security and Cybersecurity at Bank Leumi. Before we start, before I give it to William to start is a couple of minutes of discussing cloud. I work at Outbrain. Outbrain is like the other side of the universe if you speak about the differences between cloud, between banks and what I currently see. And as part of my day-to-day job, I do the onboarding sessions for new hires. And one of the first slides that I usually show to the new hires is the differences between what I've seen in my previous workplace, one of the biggest bank in Israel, and what I currently see at Outbrain. And in opposite to the bank, where you have like a very comfort and very warm place, which is called LAN, with all your systems in it, and it's well secured. And beyond the misty mountains, there is the bad internet. In most places, specifically those who I'm now operating, we reside in the cloud. All the systems are on the cloud. So there is a huge difference in concepts and cloud challenges and security challenges between banks and traditional organizations and all the others. But I'm updated just until 3 years ago, that's where I left the bank actually. So I assume there is a lot going on since then, and there are many new developments. This panel is something that is good for me as a good up-to-date status update about the going of the cloud and what's going on in the banking sector. So we'll start with the talks. William, your stage.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm William. I lead the Strategy Labs and Solutions group in Bank of Montreal. BMO is one of the largest banks in North America, and we have presence in 29 countries. So talking about our journey into cloud, on the SaaS space, we have hundreds of sanctioned and unsanctioned applications. We are implementing CASB to take care of that. On the infrastructure side, there is a hybrid cloud initiative that is being implemented with both AWS and Amazon. And the other big thing that's going on is the implementation of Office 365. So before I can start about my experience with BMO, a quick 20-second refresh on why cloud. Obviously, it provides economies of scale. You reduce your capital expenses. You achieve all the good stuff like that comes with your agility, speed of provisioning that is required for your DevOps teams. And it's not applicable for a big bank like ours, but smaller organizations or mid-sized organizations can get away from the business of managing data centers and focus their attention on where it really matters. Now, everything is not so rosy about cloud. So you have the Wild West mentality, which means I can use my corporate credit card to deploy some workloads in cloud. You also have the challenge that every aspect of security, the way you have implemented in your data center, it does not translate the same way into cloud. So, starting with my journey in BMO, I'm not saying cloud is all saint or angel, but I met with a little bit of surprise when I started with BMO. There were security professionals in my team who would see cloud with all sorts of danger signs. And part of the reason was, these were brilliant guys who had done some amazing stuff in our data center, but they were not up to speed when it came to the cloud-specific features or the latest and greatest cloud-specific features. And the other reason was that they lacked that business context. So they were unable to appreciate why cloud is supporting the digitalization drive and so on. The other challenge that I found was that all or nothing mentality. We had governance forums in place, steering committees and working groups. And folks in these working groups would debate for weeks and months talking about why we haven't implemented control number 1 and why we are talking about control number 1, why we don't have control number 99 in place. So what did I do about this? To begin with, I worked with my project manager and my subject matter experts, and I divided our implementation into 3 phases. What we must have before even we can set our foot into cloud. The phase 2 was going to be about those advanced cloud features that are not that obvious to implement, that requires workaround. And phase 3 is about that governance and oversight, and again implementing some of the cutting edge cloud features. So let's start with phase 1. Phase 1 is about those foundational security controls that you and your teams have mastered the implementation in the last 10 or 20 years. I'm talking about stuff like hardening, configuration management, vulnerability management. It's to do with remediation, change management, patch management, log management and integration with SIEM, application security, endpoint security. On the data security side, encryption, key management, and stuff like that. And what I did, work with my project manager, I created multiple working groups. The advantage of this was that it allowed greater participation from various stakeholders, and it also allowed those specific experts to represent in those specific working groups. So if I'm an expert in encryption, I'm representing in that particular working group. So all in all, it allowed all these initiatives to run in parallel. These experts were able to come up with those architecture and implementation models that we could proceed with. Phase 2 is about implementing stuff that is not so obvious. For example, IPs. You don't implement the same, it is in the same way the way you have it in your data center. File integrity monitoring, that's another challenge. For those of you who are coming from PCI background, you don't have the concept of firewall between different zones. It's about security groups, and it's about network access control lists in cloud. And we also leverage some of the upcoming features of cloud in phase 2. For example, management of containers. Now, containers is one of those things where you don't have a silver bullet to manage or provision security for containers, be it your data center or be it cloud. But what we found was that cloud at least provided us that governance model to effectively manage containers. The next use case and the final one is about the edge. And what it means is this year we are implementing software-defined network. On the WAN side or the branch side, that becomes software-defined WAN, which gives a fair amount of autonomy to your branches and to your remote offices. We are also experiencing growth in IoT, and that is only going to increase. So these remote offices and branches and IoT devices are going to create tons of information. And to process that information, it just doesn't make sense for us to channel all that information back to our data center or to that Amazon data center. And that's where the cloud or edge concept is going to kick in, where we are going to process that information close to those, where that information is going to originate. So just to conclude, there's so much going on, there's so much of opportunities. I'm not saying everything is super duper or easy with cloud. My team has to do the whole 9 yards of due diligence. But I think there are certain compelling use cases when I look in the future. Edge, big data analytics, DevOps are some of the compelling use cases where I think we are going to increasingly leverage cloud in coming years. Thank you.
Next one, David.
The slides.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is David Benattar. I'm a cyber architect in Hapoalim. And today I'm not going to talk about the benefit of the cloud, nor about the risks and limitation we have in the cloud. Most of you are aware of them. And since Moshe promised us a cocktail, I'll only show you 2 slides. This simple diagram shows you the balance between the privacy and sensitivity and the business process. You see on the top right the core banking and the regulation boundary. I'll share with you some of the experience that we in Hapoalim had using the cloud, as we understood that we need to prepare ourselves to changes in regulation. So the kickoff here for Hapoalim was in 2014. We, at that time, didn't think the cloud was mature enough, at least in our opinion, and the regulation was quite strict at that time. Nevertheless, we understood that we need a strategy, and we made first preparations to deploy an on-premises cloud, private cloud. Then we moved to more public cloud for POCs, for labs, and more playground with the cloud. We experienced some more solutions like SaaS, like PaaS, IaaS, every one of them with different vendors to understand the benefits and the advantage and disadvantage of each vendor. We learned a lot from that. 2016 was much a more exciting project. We actually chose 2 paths. The first one, we decided to deploy very simple but very quickly SaaS project that weren't so private, didn't contain any private information, weren't business critical for us, like marketing website, like APMs, small banking tools. This allowed us to learn much more about the cloud. In 2016, we held an hackathon event. We provided some programmers access to our APIs from the cloud. We learned a lot from that experience too. The second path was a bit more complex. At that time, we decided that we need to put in place an architecture and a design for on-site in our system for a SaaS solution that could integrate with our systems in Hapoalim. And that was a preparation for the last phase that we are currently doing right now in 2018. We are deploying a CRM system, and this CRM system is a SaaS, and of course it's a last phase, at least for now, until regulation, Rachel changed the regulation. But It provides us a lot of security of how to implement important and sensitive projects. So what did we learn? Quite a lot. We learned that you need to understand and follow the regulation that changes all the time, that needs to be understood, and you need to take into consideration the location of your CSP. We learned that you need continuously to analyze and evaluate your contracts with your cloud vendors. They also tend to change. We learned that you need to invest a lot in your IT, much more than we thought at the beginning. Cloud computing requires training. You need to expose the team to new technologies, to train them with various cloud companies, with various solutions. Something very important that we learned, that you need to be flexible. There's no, at least in our opinion in the bank, there's no single cloud solution for all your projects. Some projects you will need SaaS, others will need PaaS. And each vendor will provide a different solution for your project. So find the best of breed. It will definitely do the difference. Every organization needs research. In cloud, it's even more important. Technology changes. New data encryption methods are discovered, new ways to transport your data securely. So try to have a research team that find those new tools, new technology, and try to integrate it. Of course, in IaaS it would be much easier to integrate them, but sometimes vendors will be willing to integrate even in PaaS or even in SaaS. Eli Petel is not here. He spoke about... I didn't see you. You spoke about the importance of new technologies and tools. So we do the research. Sometimes we implement them in IaaS, and sometimes we try to convince CSPs to implement them. SIEM in the cloud, of course, it's an issue that should be handled differently in every type of implementation. A last thing, of course, is security measure. Most of the organizations are not aware of, I think we saw this in the first presentation, that many CSPs have full kit of security measures. So don't compromise. You have them, use them. And if something is missing, if you are not secure enough, add yours. That would be the best. So I hope I increased your confidence in using the cloud, and even in banks. And I wish you a safe journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Yoav, you're next.
Thank you, Shahar. Thank you, Shahar.
It's working.
Working? You hear me? I would like to take the conversation to a bit of an angle. We've been using cloud services in Bank Leumi for quite a while, and still it looks as if we are only on a preliminary stage, especially after hearing what William told before. Actually, an anecdote to share with you, we in the cybersecurity unit were the first to introduce cloud service to Bank Leumi, although security units seems to be conservative. I would like to speak about what I see as the main concerns when it comes to protecting the cloud. First, there is protecting our sensitive information in the cloud. And here the solutions usually revolves around cryptography, which got some major drawbacks. Don't hear me?
Enough. One is enough.
No.
Just shout.
I will
Yoav, do you want to step here? Yoav.
Is it all right? Oh, now it's working. Thank you. As I thought before, protecting our sensitive information usually revolves around encryption, and it got some major drawbacks and restrictions. And then we need to protect ourselves against attacks from the cloud. Because although we do trust the cloud, after all, we have assets there, it's still a foreign organization, and we see it as a different security zone. And of course, we need to protect our assets in the cloud. Here, sometimes we use tools which are much similar to what we have on premise, but many times it's a cloud-specific tools. And the last one is how well does the cloud service providers protect itself? And this one is paramount because it reflects on all of the others. If the cloud service provider has been compromised, then our data is at risk. And our services in the cloud are at risk. And the cloud could be used as a platform to unleash attack on our internal network or on our customers. But this one is the trickiest to mitigate because, as I said before, the cloud service provider is a foreign organization and I got no authority there. So what do? It's much like a business meeting or dating. When two people meet each other, they try to assess each other. It starts with the senses. We are looking at each other and we try to learn. How well is she dressed? Does she dress smart? Does she take good care of her physique? And then we start speaking and learning about each other. What is her background? What family did she come from? What education? What are her opinions? Is she funny? Is she smart? Can I trust her? Will she break my heart? Much the same happens when we try to introduce a new cloud service to our organization. Usually it starts with mails and phone calls by which we try to learn about the people responsible for securing the cloud. What is their background? What are their opinions? How do they take the responsibility of protecting the cloud and the customers? And then we ask for documents that can explain how do they protect the cloud. And we ask for standards they would stand for. For instance, if it Cloud Security Alliance or shared assessments, ISO, NIST, FedRAMP, whatever. And we ask if they have any security assessments they can share with us, preferably third-party assessments, SOC 2 or penetration test reports. And sometimes we ask for a reference who can share advice with us. What we've learned during this process is that we needed to adapt and learn new skill set. Usually we in the security unit see ourselves as a security solution providers for the business and for the IT. But here we needed to work more like an auditors, collecting tiny bits of information and building an overview of the cloud security posture. What we also learned during this process is that the cloud service providers also needed to adapt and learn new skill set. Many times when we ask them for information, they are reluctant to share them with us. And when we ask for documents, they either don't have them or they don't have them ready to be shared with us. And this is making our job very difficult. So I would like to use this stage to call for a widely accepted security standards to assess cloud service providers and a methodology, and to call for cloud service providers to create a culture and a process for transparency, sharing information, and building trust relationship with customers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must say that I do have a few follow-up questions, but we can wait for a while, especially for standards around cloud security. Next is Shuky. Go ahead.
Okay, I hope, yes, I hear that you can hear me. A few observations regarding using cloud services, and not in any special order. First of all, cloud services are not an objective. Using cloud services is not, it's not the target. It's a mean to get to doing your business. So none of us should say, I'm going to go to the cloud no matter what. It's because we use cloud if it enhances our services. Otherwise, we can stay with traditional IT. Second, we need to understand is that clouds are still evolving. This is a technology that was not here, let's say, 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe Moshe can be more exact about. But it is maturing all the time, and it changes all the time. In the beginning, clouds were very dark. They were dark, black clouds. They were not transparent. We didn't know exactly what's inside them. The vendors would say that they are working fine. They're going to provide us what we want. But we as customers didn't really know what's inside them. So it was a little bit scary. If you remember last time that you took a flight and the plane was going not far from high mountains and suddenly it goes into the clouds and the clouds are maybe darker, it's a little bit, feels uneasy because will the pilot notice the mountains? How will it be when we get out of the clouds? So the clouds are getting a little bit more transparent right now, and we see what's in the clouds, and this makes us feel a little bit better. So the transparency and visibility of the cloud services is extremely important. If we know how the cloud service is working, what exactly is happening inside there, and all of this is transparent and externalized to us, we can feel much more comfortable using the cloud services. Now, another observation, clouds are moving. There are winds, and the clouds are moving with the winds, and the vendors are moving with the winds, and if you don't go to the cloud, you may find out that the cloud came to you. Because yesterday or a year before, you used a service from a provider, and the service was hosted on their server somewhere in a hosting farm, or maybe the service was internally, and then this provider decided it's much easier, much simpler to move their infrastructure to Amazon, to Azure, or any other cloud, and next day you find yourself using cloud services without even knowing it. So if you don't plan for moving to the cloud and integrating with the cloud, you may find that some of your vendors have moved to the clouds, and you are now a cloud user without even wanting that. So be prepared for that as well. Another thing is another observation is that you need to know or to understand that the pace of the cloud services or the way it functions, it's completely or much different from traditional IT and what works on premise. And if you think that you can move one of the services or some services to cloud services and still keep some kind of a backup or redundancy on premise, and you can do it for a long time, I think you're mistaken, because the pace of the changes in the cloud service are going to be very fast, and the on-prem solution is going to dry out with time. So when you need it, let's say in 1 month, in a year, in 2 years, you may find that your backup on-prem solution doesn't really function as well as or as normal as your cloud service did in the last few months or few years. So it's better to make sure that you are running a robust cloud service, or maybe even using 2 different cloud services backups rather than relying on some kind of an old-fashioned backup service or on-prem service that will provide you with what you need in case something happens to the cloud, if you need to break from the vendor or so on. So it's very much like what we used to have in the past with disaster recovery planning, when we took all the old infrastructure and the old computers and pushed them to the disaster recovery center and hope that one day when disaster occurs, we can bring up the systems and everything will work. And then we found out that if it doesn't work on a usual basis, it will not work when disaster happens. So I would rather have 2 different cloud services or one very robust cloud service rather than relying on something that sits in my data center and I run it once in a blue moon. And I think that the last thing that I want to emphasize regarding using cloud services is that Another thought that's let's say we're concerned using the cloud. We're concerned about security. We want to make a hybrid solution. And hybrid solution says that we take some of the workload to the cloud service and we integrate it with our on-site, on-prem services. Some of them are manual, some of them are automated. By the way, cloud is automation, because I would not expect a cloud to be something manual. It's automated services. So it's almost like running with an engine and a horse together, and hoping to get there faster because you have another horsepower attached to your automobile. So the on-prem manual services or operations will only slow your total usage of the cloud. So in my opinion, it's better to plan for limited services on the cloud only, rather than trying to make kind of a hybrid solution that may only slow you down. And the last thing, it's a statement that Yinon said in the previous panel, and I would carve it in stone. It's don't let humans touch operation or do any changes to operations. And when you move a service workload to the cloud, we actually rely on automated services, on the automation that is going to happen in that cloud, and you move away from the manual operations and the manual interference with production. Using cloud services should bring you faster, should bring you to your business goals if you let it run in its native shape and form, which is a lot of automated services, a lot of pre-planning, and don't touch it if you don't have to. That's it.
Thank you very much. Presentation. Then Windows. That's it.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jim de Haas. I work at ABN AMRO Bank in Amsterdam, where also our global security office is located. 15 years experience in security, pretty active in the community, in the Dutch chapter for the Cloud Security Alliance. I'm also an advisory board member for EUSEC. Yoav, you mentioned a certification framework. The European Union is investing heavily in that for continuous auditing and continuous monitoring. At ABN AMRO, I work in the cloud security team, and I'm also the secretary of the Cloud Approval Board. And you know, as a secretary, you have a huge influence on what is on the agenda of the meeting. So for the past 4 years, I've been leading the debate on cloud security within our organization. And I think context is key. So I brought a slide with me about the company. We have a global presence, 20,000 plus employees, 5 million plus customers. And imagine using cloud computing on this scale. Within our bank, 80% of the organization is using the central IT facilities in the Amsterdam area. There are some countries in the world where the management team has their own IT budget and they have their own facilities. We are a corporate member of the Cloud Security Alliance because I think sharing the knowledge is key, so we do so also on a global scale. Our SaaS landscape is evolving very rapidly. We have been working on it now for 3 to 4 years. It started in the HR domain in the Netherlands, but soon after also worldwide. All countries were using SaaS applications for their HR. Phase 2, then this customer data was being used in customer satisfactions, but also in CRM implementations. In phase 3, we are now touching upon core banking. As the first speaker of the day mentioned, If you are building a new digital bank, that is what happening in our company. Core banking systems are also used. I'm not talking about the mainframe, but I have another slide on that topic. So our cloud journey started in 2012 in the HR domain, as mentioned, soon moving to CRM software. On the upper right corner, you see those new digital banks. So our management board says, let's establish a group of, let's say, 25 people. We give them money, and totally disconnected from the mothership, they can develop new financial services. So what Newton, Prosperi, and Franks did, they developed, for instance, online lending propositions, and they're running it entirely from a SaaS landscape. I must add that it's a pretty complex SaaS landscape. Each bank has, let's say, between 10 to 15 applications for customer onboarding, for marketing, for core banking. Below the line, you see what we are doing in terms of governance and adopting public cloud, so IaaS PaaS. We started with the IBM private cloud. IBM is our main IT vendor, and that was a pretty good business case to move to a private cloud. So there's a 4-year program running, and after the 4 years, we will probably have migrated around 800 applications to the private cloud. And the main characteristic is that it's fully standardized. So you have only a few flavors of operating systems, few flavors of middleware and databases. And by introducing that standardization, you can save lots and lots of money. A year ago, we also started with Amazon and Azure. So it took about a year for the contracting and setting up the engineering teams and laying the foundations. And these clouds have now been approved to use with critical data, critical customer data. And we recently started with investigation of Office 365. I also put here the logos of Cloud Security Alliance and the FS-ISAC. There was one presenter earlier, because sharing cloud security knowledge and experience, I think, is key. So we are active in the cloud working group of the FS-ISAC, and we talk to other people every month on the phone. And later this year in October, there's a conference in Amsterdam. We'll probably will attend that as well. And the little green dots, you see Cloud Approval Board and L2P. I think governance on your cloud computing, we have another attendee. Governance is key. So our cloud journey started with establishing of a Cloud Approval Board, which meets every month. There are like 10 people in there, our global security officer, representatives from legal, compliance, from security, operational risk, group audit, architecture, and IT services. Not all of them have voting rights. That is explained in detail in a charter. So every month we meet and we ratify dossiers. And ratify means we check for the completeness and the accuracy of the risk dossiers. Because every cloud project has to follow all the formal IT change and risk processes. And when we introduced Amazon and Azure, we discovered that that was not yet sufficient. So a second board was established, which checks the quality of a number of aspects like DevOps team maturity, your business case. We established an infra broker function, so depending on your workload characteristics, you get the advice to go to a particular cloud. It can be the private cloud or Amazon or Azure. So we have now sort of reached a point where senior management believes that we are entering a second phase, and that is a phase of massive adoption. So we need scalability, and our public clouds are not yet scalable enough. So a new architect was hired or appointed, and he came up with a 7 streams robustness program. So we will, in this year, spend lots of effort on improving the governance, improving the skills, think about how to work cloud native, improve our IT operations, make sure that everything from a finance perspective is sound, security and resilience, of course, and definitely architecture. So by investing in these 7 topics, we are convinced that it will make our Azure and Amazon cloud more scalable. I myself am in the skills team, so I brought my final slide about education. You need to define your cloud education strategy and also scope of implementation. Create awareness on available learning paths at your target audiences, and make sure that your engineers or experts choose a learning path. Determine how you will deliver your education. Is it classroom-based or online or blended learning? And of course, you also need budget. We are also investing heavily in developing our own cloud education, for instance, for DevOps teams moving towards the Amazon cloud. Of course, then you need to implement your education strategy and measure the results, and also measure the maturity of your cloud education. I think the main message, to wrap up, the main message here is that I think cloud security is, let's say, 80% information security, so that's not that special. But cloud computing technology is so different than the technology we used to have. And if you don't go through that particular learning curve, you will not understand how cloud computing works. And for instance, we have in our security office, we have a team that offers secrets management. So you can store your secrets in the service that they provide. That particular team gave a presentation to the Azure team. And after an hour, the conclusion was, well, they both learned 2 things. So the CISO secrets management team learned that identity management in Azure is fully covered, and that their services were actually no longer needed. And the DevOps team on the Azure part said, we can manage our own. We can manage our secrets ourselves. We don't need a central service from headquarters. So those worlds are at the moment colliding, and all parties are learning. And that's why I think education is key, and you need to invest heavily into that. That's all for now.
Thank you very much, Jim. I must say it was very impressive. Wasn't what I expected. So my first question out of the script goes to you, if you don't mind. What does your regulator has to say about this? I mean, it looks like you're all the way so mature into the cloud.
Well, we have taken our regulator on this journey as well. So we had multiple sessions explaining to them how we are adopting cloud and also educating the regulator on how cloud computing works. There is a big difference compared to what's happening here, that we don't ask permission. So we inform the regulator, we share the risk assessments, and we answer any questions they have, but we do not need to ask permission.
So they just advise, recommend, and you do whatever you want.
Well, they make sure that we have done a proper risk assessment and that the evidence is there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, sir, you want to say it?
Well, they always ask questions about arranging right to audit. That's okay. A must-have.
All right. Yeah?
Do you share the results with the regulator?
Yeah, we share a high-level PowerPoint presentation with the characteristics of the project and a summary of the risk assessment. For some dossiers, they ask for the details, and we give them what they want.
As for the rest of us, it looks like regulators are causing a lot of pain. It looks like a headache. So my first question is, why do we need this? Why not just staying with what we have, traditional IT? Why moving to the cloud in the first place?
It's 2 questions.
Start with the first one.
An interesting anecdote, this one is working. When we started working with cloud services, we head to the documents of the Central Bank of the Netherlands in order to learn how this regulator handles cloud. And I remember trying to doing Google Translate for Dutch documents, trying to
Well, you can contact me now.
And I will answer your first question. I think that regulators with banks are important. Believe it or not, I don't think that such a sensitive domain should be left for only the industry's maturity to handle with. And I think that we are having a very good relationships with the regulator. And you've seen before with Rachel's Rocha's presentation that they also see cloud as a prominent way for organization to improve and to become better. And there are also concerns that the cloud should be, the movement to the cloud would be secured. And this is much the same as we see. It's a lever for us to improve, but it's also something that we need to take care of. So I think we are seeing eye with eye with our regulator, and it's fine.
May I comment? So I strongly believe that you cannot do DevOps without a modern cloud technology. So our IT company moved to DevOps, or we're still busy transforming, and we need a cloud infrastructure to make that possible.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So my next question would be about your management view of cloud. How did you explain to your management what you're going to do? What was your strategy? What's their point of view about on cloud? They obviously see a lot of marketing presentations from vendors. How do you bridge this gap between marketing and real life in terms of cloud adoption?
You mean in security-wise?
In security-wise, yeah, of course.
Usually the cloud initiatives, despite what they said about that we were the entrepreneurs in entering cloud
Just speak
services,
to the mic.
usually cloud request is coming from business demands. And when business comes with an offer which introduce cloud service, we usually as the security organization go over this cloud security, and we try to learn to understand if this is a standalone solution or it's something that which needs to be connected into our internal systems. And we build some sort of a risk assessment document with our CRO, with our chief risk officer, in order to show to the management an overview about the cloud's security issues. And this document is being assessed, and usually we recommend on certain countermeasures needs to be implemented, and sometimes even if the cloud seems to be too dangerous, we also note this.
Anyone else wants to address this one?
So in our cloud journey in the beginning, senior management was convinced that private cloud was the solution and public cloud was carry. And it's not that the opinion of the manager has changed, but every 4 years, management is sort of replaced by new management. So
Which is good.
the management which is now controlling ABN AMRO has a
Got
more,
re-educated.
way more positive attitude towards the adoption of clouds like Amazon and Azure. And they also see the benefits in terms of cost savings and enabling DevOps.
Yes. When did you start using public cloud?
A little over a year ago. Yeah, so that's pretty recent. They took a year to build it, to lay the foundations, and then it was approved to use with critical data.
Okay. You want to refer to it?
I want to ask Jim a question. You always mention DevOps in conjunction with cloud service, because DevOps you can also build inside the organization. So why do you couple them together?
Well, in theory you are right, but in our private cloud, IBM is king in terms of systems engineering and administration, and IBM does not allow developers to do anything there. So we have multiple clouds on purpose. Even within AWS and Amazon, we have a different strategy. So within Azure, everything is tight. And within Amazon, there's way more degrees of freedom for the DevOps teams. So it depends on where your cloud journey starts. So yes, you can do DevOps in a private cloud, but not when IBM is boss.
And this is because you are already mature in the cloud, so it's more convenient for you to implement the DevOps in the cloud.
Yes. Yeah, with IBM you have 10 years contracts which you cannot change easily. So they will maintain the private cloud, I think, for years to come.
William, you want to say something?
It's just about the speed and agility, and it's the fact that those number 1, 2, 3 cloud service providers, they are into that business. That's the business model. So when your organization has got a release cycle of, for example, in our case, in some of the DevOps cases, we have a release cycle of 2 weeks. I know media companies and retailers who have got a release cycle of 24 hours or 48 hours. Your internal infrastructure isn't fast enough to provision hardware at that kind of pace that you are expecting. So pretty much from what I understand, cloud is an integral part of DevOps, the way it is.
They were probably born together, because we're trying now to incorporate DevOps into our internal network, and it seems that you are speaking about DevOps as something which is natural to the cloud.
Correct.
It is most cloud services were built to scale out. We build in the beginning, from the beginning, to scale and be as automated as possible. I want to follow up with another question about risks in general. What's the most challenging aspect of cloud? People usually refer to the loss of control. How do you see it? How do you see the most challenging aspects of adopting cloud computing?
It's easier this way. I think it's very much like what I tried to say before. It's the changes. The cloud is a moving target, and even if you think that you have all your controls in place and you are secured and you did all the penetration testing and complied with every regulation that you need to comply with, since the cloud services are changing and your organization is changing, the compliance issues needs to be investigated all the time. It's an ongoing process. You cannot say I tested the cloud service on January 1st. That means that for the next year I have a one year contract. Let's say for the next year I'm fine. You need to check it all the time. It's something that you cannot stop doing, because otherwise you may find that your cloud services have expanded or your cloud services have moved and you are not in compliance. And in compliance does not equal resilience. So even if you're in compliance with regulation, maybe something have changed that it puts you in risk. So you need to be on alert all the time. Very difficult.
Yeah, so in our company, lack of assurance is a frequently occurring risk, but that does not always have to be a problem, especially if you want to innovate. You will probably work with smaller companies, like the fintech companies. They cannot afford the big four to come over and do their audits for SOC 2. So if management says that within certain parts of retail banking, innovation is needed, and you are allowed to work with smaller cloud providers, they will accept the lack of assurance risk.
Yes, David.
I think another challenge is to be able to integrate and respond quite quickly to new threats and integrate the protection in cloud. CSP not always want to integrate those protections. Sometimes you will probably integrate them faster on an on-site, on-premises system than than implement them on Azure or Amazon. This is a challenge because security and threats always emerge. And I believe if CSPs will act faster, it will assure regulators to be able to move also faster and allow lots of flexibility in using the cloud.
Okay.
As I said before, one of the main challenges is, of course, the trust relationship and protecting our data. And I will elaborate a bit about protecting our data. If the data is not very important, then we can trust the cloud to protect it. But what if it's a sensitive information? It's our customers' information. It's a financial information. Then I would like to encrypt or tokenize this data. And if, for instance, somebody will offer me to use some sort of media encryption, then it's useless because when the application is running, then the data is exposed. And the same goes with what people spoke before about bring your own key, because eventually bring your own key, the key is somewhere, even if it's on an HSM machine, it's on the cloud. And when the application is running, the key is somewhere in the machine's memory. And so if somebody is attacking the application, then the application will serve him with decryption services. So it's also not very useful. So the most strong solution is to do the encryption on premise and to load the data to the cloud already encrypted. But this type of solution is crippling the application because many functions won't work this way. Sorts will be broken and searches will be broken. So I see it as a very major concern and when working with cloud services. Another challenge that I see, we are now toying with the idea of building a hybrid cloud, so stretching our parts of our data center to the cloud. And when we start exploring this concept, we found out that connecting the two organizations, the cloud service, IaaS in this place, and our internal network, makes a lot of challenge because when systems are connected, a lot of the background systems are being also connected. For instance, if it's command and control mechanism or backup mechanisms, and if we see the cloud and we see the cloud as a different security zone, so it threatens our internal network. So we thought maybe to use some sort of a lesser important network to do this stretching. But even though we still see that there are services which interconnect the less secured networks, our less secure inside networks, and some of the more secured inside networks. And we also afraid that even in the less secured internal environment, we still have sensitive information that will be exposed to the cloud if we'll interconnect the two networks.
Yeah, yes, please.
Is there anyone before we could say or test that they have visibility into what kind of cloud accounts, subscriptions, public, of course, they have, that they are aware of them? Should I go again?
I didn't hear, but I'm 40.
Right.
Maybe that's my hearing.
Right, so is there anyone on the forum here that can attest that they believe they have good visibility and control into their public clouds? Like what cloud accounts they have, what assets move there, what data lives there? Should I go again?
William?
I'm not from the financial sector, but I can say about what's going on in our organization, which is internet-based organization, the visibility into the cloud is much better than what we have in-house. For example, we run Hadoop instances, and to create logs for Hadoop is almost impossible in some cases, whereas where we use a cloud instance, it doesn't matter if it's a GCP, AWS, or Azure, the visibility is much better. And we see more and we understand what's going on there in a much better way than what we have in-house. But we're not financial, so.
Yeah, we're busy implementing a CASB that will definitely improve the visibility. And the Cloud Approval Board also asked for reporting on unauthorized cloud usage.
I would agree with him that certain governance is so much more mature in cloud. For example, policy orchestration platforms. Now, in your own data center, you have to implement something like software-defined network to really, truly implement that orchestration platform, whereas you get that in Azure and AWS. Talking about logging, CloudTrail, for example, is just one of those features that captures all the log. And then your team has to work on the architecture. You know, what is the right fit? Is it API-based? Is it agent-based? But eventually, all those logs can be integrated with your on-prem SIM or UEBA solution, or it could be integrated with something that is deployed in the cloud. The challenge that you face on visibility on certain areas that you do in your data center, primarily, like I mentioned, IDS, IPS, file integrity monitoring, when you're talking about zoning and firewall between them for PCI clients, that's where you have the challenge. But I think it's a whole new approach. You can overcome IDS, IPS deficiency by going with managed service providers, or you can channel the traffic back into your data center, but that doesn't sort of defeats the purpose of using cloud. With firewall, between different subnets, you can use the security groups and network access controls list. So it's not quite the same as what you do in your data center, but it's a different approach.
I would like to connect your question with Shahar's previous question about the challenges in the cloud. One of the challenges in the cloud, that each cloud got its own solutions, and we need to learn to cope with each cloud as a single child. So, for instance, there are cloud services that say you will not get any logs from us unless there is some sort of a breach, and then we'll share it with you. There are cloud services that make pretty good logs, and there are cloud service providers that supply logs and make restrictions on retrieving them, and we need to build ETLs, and the ETLs are being restricted because they are concerned about consuming resources. And there are other solutions in which we can use CASB, but CASB does not cover all of the flavors. So when we are using cloud services, we need to learn to use use many tools as the cloud services provide us.
And getting the teams together in one room, I think, is key. So the SOC explaining to the Amazon team how security monitoring works, and vice versa. And if the SOC says we have a security module and we want to implement it on Amazon, the Amazon team will say, no, we don't need your services. We can do our own monitoring. So you have to start a debate, and you have to learn how this stuff works.
We have time for one last question, unless you want to add another thing.
Yeah, I'd like to touch a European topic. So with regards to GDPR and cloud and data localization, I heard a few companies where they decided to instantiate their applications, or separate their applications in Europe versus in the States or other countries. And I also heard about tackling GDPR in general in one instance and taking that across the world because it's expanding. So how do you, especially the European side of the table, tackle the GDPR in the cloud and the data localization?
I'll let you
Well, Amsterdam is Europe, so I will. In our company, GDPR implementation is a business problem. Security is included, they say. Our data is pretty much all over the globe, from Canada to Australia, because we have SaaS applications everywhere. And all projects, when they start, they must do a privacy impact assessment. That's where the experts are consulted, also from a legal perspective. And in some cases, the country where the data is hosted is important, and then they take measures. But we don't have like a clustering strategy to put data in certain parts of the world. So it's mainly if it's not allowed from a legal perspective, it won't happen.
Another question from the crowd?
Sorry, if I could just add something on GDPR. So GDPR is, if I could really dumb down the idea, it's about responsible handling of consumer data. So if I'm a consumer, I have the right to ask, how are you using my data? And I have the right to dictate to not to process my data in a certain way. So essentially, it's about a governance mechanism rather than a security concern. If you have rock-solid governance where you are listening to your consumers and you are aware of their concerns and you're able to address them, that's all it counts. You could be processing that information in your data center, or you could be processing it in cloud. It's all about how you have established the process in addressing the consumer's concerns.
One more thing. In a few cases, if it's a large enough supplier, you can ask him to use a certain data center in order to store your organization data. It's not for any cloud service providers, but the big one can save pods for you in a country of your choice if they have a data center there.
You can also rent out iRent from certain cloud vendors.
Sorry?
You can get your own iRent.
Another question from the crowd?
Yes, you talked a lot about the implementation of cloud services and migrating services to the cloud. I think the most concerning thing is the incident response methodology and how you build the incident response methodology in a case of multiple cloud services, and how to handle incident, which is mainly an issue of control when you are giving some of the control to the cloud provider.
It's much like the issues before. Each cloud has its own tools and mechanisms, so each cloud that we incorporate into our systems, we need to learn new and build new tools to use in the case of an attack. So it's actually also cloud specific.
So you build different methodology for each cloud provider?
Unfortunately, yes, because you have no other solution. Each cloud service has its own systems, its own administrative interface and capabilities. It's like a different, totally different. You have no other choice. Each one is different. So cloud is not always just nice and easy and cheap to incorporate. There are also tools in using clouds.
Okay, another question from the regulator.
Yes, please. I think it relates to what Yoav have just said. I think that in this session, CloudDay, we even discussed what happens if the client, I mean the bank in our case, terminates the association with the provider, or the cloud provider, especially when we talk about the SaaS model. We know that it's not so easy to transfer from one service provider to another one, so there is an issue, a concern relating to business continuity, because even if the bank has some backup in its own premise, and of course the data, as I said in my presentation, the provider is obligated to transfer the data, but again, the system, the application of The other provider is usually different, and the transition is not so easy. It's really a challenge, and this was not referred in.
So, 2 remarks on that question. It can take up to 1 or 2 years to migrate to a new environment, especially in the HR domain, where you sort of have this annual cycle of payrolling and legislation. And I hear there is a new phenomenon in the area of escrow. So if the SaaS provider goes bankrupt, there's a company that steps in and pays the bills, so your systems keep running, and that will give you time to plan for the migration.
I have a final question. Yeah.
I want to address Rocha's question. First of all, maybe it's too early. We haven't seen breakups between clients and large cloud provider on a daily basis, so it needs to be exercised. And maybe it's time to come up with a CCP, a cloud continuity planning, or something to drill it and to do some exercises of how do we move from one cloud provider to another cloud provider. But again, this is just theory right now. It's not something that we are doing, but I believe that in the future, when cloud services are going to be much more used on a daily basis and in all places, banks and financial services companies, these kinds of exercises will have to take place, because today you are changing a data center, tomorrow you're going to have to move from one cloud provider to another, and this is still something that was not proven yet, to my opinion.
Maybe don't like the regulators, but there is a concern for you, the banks and other financial institutions, about, regarding the service, the cloud providers. Anyhow, I think that maybe governmental entities, like in our case, the National Cyber Directorate, maybe they are to oversight such services providers which really give significant services to many organizations. So I think that will has to do with more comfort from the cloud providers. Maybe just to think about it.
Moshe, do we have time for another question, or that's it?
Maybe last question, guys, before the final last question would be what kind of beers do you like? But we have a question before that.
One before that. As security experts, you see both sides of the equation. You like gatekeepers, but you need to be enablers in terms of cloud adoption. Would you rather, or would you see your next security implementation? Would you choose a cloud-based security solution as your weapon of choice for the next implementation?
My weapon of choice would be preventive controls, just to make sure that DevOps teams don't make mistakes outside of office hours.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, to be short, yes, I would choose a cloud security solution, with the permission of my regulator, of course.
Of course, everything.
But yes, I would definitely choose a cloud-based security solution, because I believe that's the way, that's the direction where our security companies or vendors are going.
Anyone else? All right. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time, and thank you guys for attending. We'll see you next year, right?
You can wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, who's staying so late. Thank you for being with us. Thank our speakers who came.